Genshin has some pretty bad units, but there's one awful unit who is truly the worst of them all. That'd be none other than Diona. Let's talk about why this is the case, why don't we? My name is Juice, and let's get into it. So, for starters, was Diona ever good to begin with? Well, there was in fact a timeline in which she wasn't the worst possible character to be conceived upon this earth, or to that I suppose. For starters, shielders were pretty popular back in the day. They still are now, but most would agree with me when I say that healers are generally more well valued as opposed to shielders thanks to fanfare, plus the general improvements that have struck the kits of healers over time. Diona's shield for a 4-star was quite nice, so that made her a pretty neat little defensive option back in the day. She provided some heals on top of that if necessary. They have incredibly slow ticks, but back then, enemies would seldom ever do enough damage for you to genuinely need a lot of healing. There were also a grand total of 0 HP loss mechanics based characters back in the day, so an excessive amount of healing with nothing else to offer was actually rather looked down upon. Diona's little bonus sustenance was more than enough at the time, not to mention how she was a fantastic holder of a sacrificial bow, which would allow her to battery popular freeze teams excellently. Global Morgana would have used this unit at the end of their team, yet the mere mention of Morgana should highlight how truly outdated this character is. The shielding was well appreciated here, since even if Morgana was more so about Ganyu's burst, you could on-field her more easily because the shield would protect you from potential knockback. The enemies being frozen would have already done that for you in the first place, but it was a solid additional layer of protection added on. She worked well as a battery in Ayaka freeze too, especially if you needed that extra bit of defensiveness. Sackbow comes in handy once more, as you could use Diona's skill twice to generate more cryoparticles to charge up Ayaka's nuclear burst. There was also a niche use case for her as a nuke melt support because of how much EM her C6 dished out. To be honest, I always thought that this constellation was kind of overrated even back then. You didn't use this except when you were in damage per screenshot scenarios. Her ability to hold 4-piece noblesse was quite nifty too, because there's no Bennett in freeze teams, therefore attack percent is naturally really high value in those, so that slapped some additional value onto her kit. There was a decent amount going for her, so where did it all go wrong? I mean, you heard the part where I said Ganyu and Ayaka, correct? Why is it that all discussions that take a look into characters who have 0 usability these days are cryo users? I guess it's not that much of a surprise. Everyone and their mother has talked about how horrible that element is at this stage, which deeply saddens me as somebody who quite likes the cryo element. Diona's a special case though. Most cryos are pretty bad in today's meta, but still have some redeeming qualities. You're never going to recommend that somebody pulls Shenhe these days as an example. Well, you're not going to tell somebody to do that anyway, considering how inapplicable that advice is. Thanks for sending her to jail, Hoyoverse, because her kit's not in the best state right now. Yes, she buffs cryo very well, but buffing cryo very well isn't that much of a blessing at the moment. Even then, the character still has value as one of Ayaka's best installed teammates. You can also make her work in some Ganyu melt teams, but those will generally be a lot harder to play than her burn melt teams. Rosaria is still a neat cryo sub DPS, Ayaka can still clear as her burst does respectable damage, Ganyu is pretty flexible teams-wise so she can adapt to situations, then you have the 2 best cryos in Charlotte and Rio Beastly. Where, pray tell, does Diona fit into any of this? There's no redeeming quality that she offers which isn't covered by another character significantly better. You need healing? Charlotte exists. You need shielding? Layla is extreme Diona power creep. Bet some of you were waiting for me to mention her, right? It's simply true. Layla's shield is freaking insane, and even if she can't heal, dude, literally just use Miko or Charlotte then, because there is 0 incentive to ever use Diona as a healer again for some simple reasons. First off, as I mentioned earlier, the ticks are ridiculously slow. If you want healing, you're either fighting an annoying boss like the Coppers, or you're using the gorgeous Lady Farina. 99% of the time, your intentions will be Farina related. Good luck keeping up any sort of fanfare consistency with Diona. The heals are single character with no source of mass healing. The ticks are really not that big, and the HP drain will outpace your Diona's heals by a long shot. Somebody like Mika, whose heals are decent but nothing too special, have a big edge over Diona simply by having a burst which allows for quick fanfare frontload, because the lad's able to delightfully provide some team-wide healing upon his bursts cast. Sure, his individual heal ticks are only okay, but that makes up for all of it. The alcohol hater has no such strengths, because she was mostly designed as a shielder first and foremost, with the healing being more of a neat little afterthought. There is too much competition in her niche now. Layla, Mika, Charlotte if we're limiting the scope to only cryos, and oh goodness, you do not want to see how this one would get decimated if she were to compete against the full cast of healers and shielders that this game has to offer. Not even just the 5 stars. The 4 stars would have no problem making quick work of her too. You know you're a cooked unit when freaking Sayu is a better character than you. you. She offers little in the way of damage buffing that any other character can't easily replace, with minimal specific synergies that really ask for her. Plus, if you really want to try to cope with the old crowd DPSs, you're gonna be using Rosaria. Let's be so for real right now. She is a better 4th slot thanks to your decent sub DPS, crit rate buffs, and her shared ability to effectively hold and proc 4-piece Noblesse. You can also stick her on a Fav Lance and voila, cryo particles for days. Even back during Diona's absolute prime, I still would have considered Rosaria to be better than her. You really can't make a case for her anymore, let's be real. Is there any cope use cases in which you could potentially justify using Diona? Well, can I be real right now? No. Every Genshin character should be good in at least one team. If you've been watching me for a while, then you know that I'm not a big fan of Kave's kit, because it actively works against Bloom and its nature. In Diona's case, it's not like anything's working against her in specific, her kit just fell off extraordinarily hard. Actual zero use cases character. I've always tried to give her the benefit of the doubt, but to be totally real with you right now, I officially think this adds her to my list of the worst characters in Genshin Impact. You can argue a little more in Kave's case, and that guy's barely functional, just like his finances. Anyways, you get the idea. This character is physically, or I guess in elemental terms, cryogenically unable to fit into any team without it feeling like, remind me why I'm not using Layla or Charlotte again? This begs the question, is there any hope for this character? Frick no! Even if Cryo became the best element overnight with insane buffs and crazy new reactions, Diona would still be dead in the frozen water. I think it's actually quite simple. She got power crept. Easy as that. Layla and Charlotte put her out of business for good. This is usually the part of the video where I would like to optimistically cope about how the future of this character could potentially end up being bright, or by coming up with some reasonable ways to buff them. Yeah, it ain't happening with this character. Even freaking Kave is more savable than this creature. You might think that I'm going in a bit too harshly, but I implore you to name me a non-damage per screenshot use case that this character has. Besides, even there, she's been power crept. A Constellated Farina's buffs are far more preferable to that of Diona C6. It's gonna depend from unit to unit, of course, but if you're in need of VM share, then Sucrose is right there, buddy. You can always just use Instructor's Bennett or something along those lines, too. Obviously, the character will be functional, which is a step up above a few characters, I guess. Yet even the most horrendously bugged characters can bring more to the table as opposed to Diona. But being functional is just not enough anymore. The meta has shifted so much. We have extremely strong characters these days. There will pretty much always be a better support to employ in your teams over her. I don't think Diona needs to come back, personally speaking. I don't think that there's many people out there who care about this character in the first place, so I'd say that we really aren't missing out on much. She had her time in the meta as a character that was pretty good in her niche, while having some solid generalist qualities considering that shielders were more valued back then, alongside the fact that we had a much smaller support roster. She'll always be an F tier with little potential to rise up into our world. It is what it is. I made this video since a few people pointed out how Diona was 100% a more forgotten unit than Rosaria, to which I thought, yeah, excellent point actually. You're gonna see a lot more play with her compared to Diona, who basically has 0 users these days. That's actually pretty funny because I completely proved your guys' points. Diona was so freaking forgettable that I forgot to even mention her in my forgettable characters video. Wild. It's pretty clear after having a look into the kit that she has that she's basically never returning to the meta. No shot whatsoever. I don't see a world in which she'd actually be useful again. Rosaria is fantastically competent when placed next to this character. It's honestly hilarious. Thank you all for pointing out how garbage Diona is. Definitely comment below if there's other horrible characters that you want to see me tear apart. If there's enough demand for one individual unit, then I'll see to making a video about them. Hopefully this video was able to tell you why Diona is truly one of the worst characters in all of Genshin Impact. This has been Juice, signing out, and guess what, Alloy? You're no longer alone. There's another free star cryo bow user to join you in the dreaded garbage wastes.